mention about a maintenance issue that I had not long ago. I had an annual done on my 2004 Cessna Turbo 2068. And during the annual, they pressurized the front strut, supposedly to spec. And I noticed that it sat different, but the mechanic definitely said that the strut was serviced to specifications, and that's the way it was supposed to be. So anyway, I took off from my home airport, and I landed in McKinney. McKinney's runway is slightly elevated, and off to the left, I would say off the runway goes down about 20 feet, and to the right is the services, the FBO, parking, etc. We are landing to the south, that is. I touched down in McKinney, and immediately noticed I had very little control of the airplane on the ground. The airplane kind of veered off to the left, and despite my rudder inputs, I had no response from the airplane, and then I started my braking inputs, and I had very little response to the airplane. Finally, as I was about to leave the runway and go off the left side, I aggressively mashed the brake and the right rudder pedal. The airplane leaned onto the front strut, and the left wheel raising off the ground was the right wheel, and it did correct the direction of the airplane enough to keep me on the runway, probably only about 5 feet from going off. So initially I thought, what did I do? I wasn't paying attention. What was the wind like? What was going on? And there was some kind of pilotage problem. Parked the airplane, I thought about it. I had to go to a baseball game in McKinney, and then I went back. I definitely felt like the plane handled differently on the ground. I struggled with it, but I hadn't put together what the problem was at that point. I took off, go to my home airport. I land at my home airport, again, in a south direction. My home airport, the runway is much narrower. It's, I believe, 60 feet wide. And immediately the plane veered to the left. I ran off the runway into the grass. I was able to brake coming out of the grass and onto the taxiway. Fortunately, I didn't hit anything. Fortunately, that area of grass is very smooth, and I had no damage or issues running off the runway except for danger of losing control of the airplane. So I called the mechanic and I told him what was going on. Of course, he immediately thought it was a pilotage problem. Got together with some of my friends at the airport, and as their friends, they didn't exactly describe it as a pilotage problem. However, certainly that was their immediate suspicion. The mechanic came out to the hangar, removed both the right and left wheels, and changed the brakes, checked the bearings, just in case there was a problem with one side pulling, that being the left side since I went off to the left both times. All of it was great, and so off I go. Definitely struggling controlling the airplane on the ground, and I fly to Illinois from my home airport in Texas, and when I land in Illinois, I struggle with the control of the airplane on the ground, but I am at a big airport, very wide runways. I am able to keep the airplane on the runway, but I realize I'm simply getting better at controlling the airplane that is essentially difficult to control on the ground. So as I pull into the FBO, I'm having a very difficult time getting the airplane to make a 90-degree turn into the person that's directed me in. And I finally get it to do it, but it was difficult. And I realize, okay, there's something wrong with the airplane. There's no doubt about it. I cannot control the airplane on the ground. I've had it looked at twice. Nobody seems to be able to find the problem. So I'm at Synergy in Bloomington, Illinois, and I meet with the mechanic next morning. I tell him the problem I'm having. The only difference is that my front strut was serviced technically to specifications, but it didn't look right to me. Plane sat different, nose up, much more so than it did before, and then I wanted him to take out some of the pressure to get it back down to where it was before. About 5 inches or so of the chrome strut portion showing. So he does that, and I jump in the airplane to take off, and I immediately realize I have complete control of the airplane again. So I fly home, no problems. I have control of the airplane on the ground, and I am telling my hangar neighbor what's going on, and he is an ex-mechanic and has a Cessna 210, and he tells me, oh, I know the problem. Your front strut was over-serviced, and when the strut is in the full downward position, it locks the front wheel, and you don't have control of steering with the rudder, and certainly not with braking because the front strut will not turn. So, obviously a very difficult lesson learned. The lesson was, despite my relative inexperience, and I probably had about 400 hours, the plane was telling me something was wrong. I was feeling like something was wrong, but I wasn't listening well enough because I was being told that there was wrong with the airplane and that it was a problem that I was having with the pilotage of the Cessna. So I do have a friend that's an American Airlines pilot, and he has a lot of general aviation experience and has been an American Airlines pilot for at least 25 years. And he said, you know, the advice given to me was, well, you have enough hours now that if the plane is not reacting as it should, you stop flying and find out what the problem is, and don't go again until you have an answer. You know your plane, you've got a good number of hours in it, and when it is not responding as it normally should, you're going to be able to tell at this point in your flying experience. So, one of the lessons that I learned besides listening to the airplane is that I need to understand more about how my airplane works So this past year I did a owner-assisted annual, and interestingly enough, it was by far the most extensive annual that I have had. Followed the book, the maintenance book on the annual. A lot of times there are shortcuts taken because the plane is relatively new, and it's easy to say, hey, this is relatively new, don't look at it. Or it seems to be operating fine, or a cursory look. But this owner-assisted manual fellow that I used was incredibly thorough, probably spent about 6 hours going over my log books and over all the ADs. Then we tore this plane apart. The thing that I don't like about annuals is you're tearing the plane apart, and to me, sometimes it seems like it could cause more trouble in the long run than help, but certainly I learned a lot about the airplane. I learned a lot about the inspection ports and what you're looking for. And I learned a lot about what the expectations are on an annual. So I thought it was very valuable. And despite that, it was 1/4 of the price of my annuals that I've had before. So I did have quite a bit of hours at the hangar with the annual, but it was worth it just to learn more about the airplane. So ultimately, lesson learned, listen to your airplane. Don't fly it if it doesn't seem to be responding as it normally should. Don't stop until you get an answer that makes sense. Don't always let people try to convince you that it's a pilotage problem when you really feel like the airplane is not responding to the inputs as it normally would.